Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Temte. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, we have Todd Bracher joining us. Todd is the founder of BetterLab, which is a science-based design platform addressing global challenges through innovative solutions. And Todd's work at BetterLab and his award-winning design firm Bracher has transformed industries, creating impactful products for major brands worldwide. How did I do, Todd?
Oh, pretty well. That sounds pretty inflated, that snippet there. So, but I'll take it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it came from your website, so so there we go.
Understood.
All right. Well, Todd, it's lovely to have you here today. We're going to talk about the world of design and its importance in the world of business. But before we get started, I ask all my guests this question. Please give us the elevator pitch version of your story.
Yeah. So first off, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and have this opportunity to chat. The elevator pitch is not so easy unless it's a long elevator ride. But in the shortest form I could frame it is I see myself as a design partner to really help unlock growth. And it sort of sounds obvious, but I think design is not yet fully understood and its true potential. And that's really why I fit in, is that sort of bridge between the market and the business itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Where'd you go to school? What are some of your credentials?
Yeah. So I have Harvard on the Highway is a big part of my education. But my formal training was a Bachelor of Industrial Design in the late 90s from Pratt Institute in New York, and then a master's degree from a school in Copenhagen, Denmark for interior design and furniture design.
Excellent. Excellent. So you've traveled the world.
Yeah. I spent about 10 years overseas. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. That gives us a much more rounded view of the world. I recommend everybody make the opportunity to do that. Todd, if you had to pick one event in your life that was just a key accelerant for your career, what would that moment be?
I think really specifically, I was working in London as a designer, young designer for another designer who was very, very well known. And he's sort of almost like a musician, kind of a character. And I remember asking him, sort of model yourself to want to be doing what he was doing. And I remember asking him, what do you love about design? And waiting for him to hear, the parties or the kind of color of it or kind of the surface of it. But he said the business of design. And I remember that really unlocked something for me because I didn't expect, number one, him to say that. And number two, the business side was always seen as kind of someone else's job, and that designers are not supposed to think this way. But that really resonated for me because I realized that's actually what I loved about design as well. And I kind of hadn't seen it until he said that. So that was the moment for me.
Excellent. So is there a subculture, almost rock star kind of a world that you live in of designers around the world?
Yeah, I sort of say it's like, I don't know, being a famous plumber in a way. Like it's not enough to be well known on the sort of Instagram and things like this, but it's in the circles. There's a world there that I think, to give the design community credit, that really does help shape contemporary culture, just as music can and just literature can. I think design also does. And there's maybe 100 of us or so that are kind of leading that. So I think, there is a bit of a world out there.
Yeah, awesome. Well, in my other, our listeners know that my other persona is as a rock musician. We got a little project going there, so that's why I took us down that road. Todd, let's start with the basics. Tell us about BetterLab and Bracher. Why does design matter to businesses of all shapes and sizes?
Yeah, so a great question. So I have these two entities essentially, and one is more of the Bracher business is more of a service business. I've been doing this for 25 years, and BetterLab I've started a couple of years back, and it's more my venture platform, kind of the things that I want to achieve. Not all clients find me necessarily, so you kind of need the push and pull. And over the years, I've really seen the same patterns where companies would say, okay, you're a designer. Can you please make this thing, let's say, look better, or from a cosmetic level, improve it, you pick the right colors, or it's very superficial in my opinion. And I'd sit there and realize, like, have you considered, does the market care? Has the market seen this? Have they understood this? Like, I'd ask kind of common sense questions. And I early on found that folks really weren't that interested. They just wanted you to make something look good. And you would make that. And in the end, it wouldn't do well in the market. And you'd understand, well, of course not, because you didn't ask these, 10 or 100 questions we've been asking. And so early on in my career, I started to ask those questions and start to kind of climb my way up into as close to C-suite, if not in the C-suite as possible, and then start to help to contribute to help shape what's being made instead of just kind of painting a nice surface on it. And I think that's really where change happens. Really, that bridge between the market and the business is really critical.
Yeah. So are you involved? Do you get involved with the product folks and what's called value analysis, where you're taking a product and breaking it down into its component parts, design and aesthetics being one of those, and really shining a light on the value that can be created by great design?
100%. The way that I approach design is I call it context-based design. And what I mean by that is, short story. If I take you to the park and I say, let's look at this tree here, I don't think you'll see the tree as having, oh, it has too many leaves, or it's too green, or the shape of the leaf isn't great, or I don't think you critique nature that way, because it's a result of an ecosystem, right? The rainfall, the climate, the sunlight, you name it, creates the tree.
Right.
So that's how I think about design. So within an organization, we essentially design and list all the governors that create the ecosystem. So all the stakeholders, all the insights, all the information, what do you want it to do? What does it have to achieve? What are the market needs? What's the business needs? And we really get into that. And once all of the things we can account for are present, the design essentially is inevitable. And it's almost the easy part. So it becomes clear for leadership why it's this shape, why it's this color, why it's this whatever it is, because it's solving that greater condition. So that's, to me, a way that I sort of created to take abstraction out of design.
Oh, that's awesome. So continuing this thread, what's the most common self-inflicted, unforced error that you see businesses make when they're not taking design seriously?
I think folks really fall in love with their ideas, and I know I do too. And I think that's it's a common risk. And I think what's really critical is to get out there and test. And I don't necessarily mean the kind of old focus groups and kind of things; they have value as well. But I really believe the mistake is not truly understanding your market's needs, and you're thinking you can apply a marketing budget on top of a poor design. It doesn't work. And your market will let you know. And whereas really understanding the market need well is mission critical, and you could always reverse engineer it into your organization's capabilities. But that's where it starts. And a lot of companies assume too much as opposed to really get into the understanding.
So ego gets in the way, and I can imagine, as a former founder myself, who I knew every part of the business. I created the product, and so my ego and my expectations of what my customers want, that is this bias that's calcified inside my brain. I can just imagine that is that most common unforced error. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's value with it as well. I mean, there's expertise and tribal knowledge and things you bring, and it causes you to ask certain questions. I mean, there's no doubt it's valuable, but I think there's a point where you need to kind of let the universe guide you a little bit, if that doesn't sound too crazy, and make some decisions based in objective truths as opposed to gut hunches and things like this.
Yeah. So let's run a really quick thought experiment. You have the chief executive officer of a mid-sized company sitting in front of you right now, and they've lost their edge in the marketplace. They know it. They're stagnant and undifferentiated. What's your message to this individual to help them see the benefits of investing in design resources from firms like yours?
So the pattern I often see is it, brands that sort of businesses that kind of fall flat-footed, or kind of, just as you're saying, kind of fall a step behind, or they lost their edge in a way. And they usually have had an edge and usually had an insight that was meaningful. And one of the first things I like to do is go backwards, and I look under the hood, and we look back at the IP and the value that you originally brought you to where you are. And typically it's dusting off of that. And it really helps businesses kind of find their footing again, putting that through a sort of contemporization effort. And but the answers are right there. It's really the question of finding it, sort of reassembling it in a way, as opposed to, it's not always new. It's not always, trying to get to the next frontier. I think you want to parallel path those efforts, but sometimes the lift is a little bit easier and it's actually right in front of you.
Yeah, well, that's very refreshing, because my experience with this kind of work is that firms come in and they say, "You've been doing it all wrong. This is now the answer. Go do this." So I really like that approach. That's really cool.
I mean, if I could add to that, if you don't mind, I think
Yeah,
one of the
please.
patterns we see all the time is it's worked so well in the past, so we're afraid to kind of move forward, and that's another challenge a lot of companies have, their own shadow from the past in a way. So, but again, I think what's beautiful is the market's always evolving, the landscape's always growing, and I think new opportunities are always there. And I think if you're able to really start to do the effort to understand that landscape, there's new ways you could interface with it with your existing IP, essentially. So that's really the magic for me.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Well, we're going to take a really short commercial break. We'll be right back with Todd Bracher talking about the world of innovation and design. Hey everyone, I'd like to invite you to start your weekend with me on the Saturday Morning Muse podcast. I briefly explore topics that span leadership, business management, education, and personal continuous improvement. Subscribe to the Saturday Morning Muse podcast on your favorite podcast streaming app, or visit andrewtemte.com for more information. And we're back with Todd Bracher talking about the world of innovation and design. Todd, on the BetterLab website, the manifesto begins with the phrase, "Despite the belief that there is an available solution for everything, many of the world's leading health, social, and environmental concerns remain largely unaddressed." Now, if I asked you for the primary reason why we haven't made more progress towards solving big societal challenges, what's the why? What would that be?
Oh, there's so many. There's a few that come straight to mind. I have a lot of relationships with scientists over the years, and boy, I tell you, some of the things I see in the lab, it can change the world. And I often ask them, why are these things not in the world? And some say they're working on it. Okay. Others say, what do you mean? I'm a corporate scientist, and I'm there to get as many patents under my belt. Others are academics. And then other patents are lost in patent moats or tied up in litigation. And of course, the worst of them all is they're in the world, amazing product, amazing solution, but in a terrible delivery and terrible design, and it's not working, and no one cares to use it. And a lesser product is winning because it's, let's say, better design. So from what I've seen, I believe that most scientists are out there that are doing the good work. And I think, boy, if just getting these things out of the lab and into the world, but through a design process that actually helps resonate with that market, to me is really that's the purpose of BetterLab, and to offer a vehicle to bring these ideas out of the lab and into our lives. So for me, it's a matter of lining up design with the science and the IP that's actually transformative.
Yeah. So if I asked you to, let's look back at the last decade of your work, what's the coolest thing that you worked on?
Oh man, so there's a lot. One of the coolest ones, and a good colleague of mine, he's a former NASA guy, he's a scientist. He helped create using a particular spectrum of light that in the International Space Station, called UVC light. He didn't invent the spectrum, but he's working with it.
Mm-hmm.
UV light, as you know, is very aggressive. It kills virals, pathogens, including people. Like it's quite dangerous of the light. But the far spec side of UV light is called UVC light, and it's actually human safe, but it still is effective for killing pathogens and virals and so on. So, short story is right when COVID started, he decided to spin up this patent into an architectural lighting company. And he thought, great, we can fit out architecture with light, just like in the space station, and create human safe environments. And it sounded great, and we joined and we started to create these products. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, this isn't really going to work because contemporary architecture is quite big. It's not small, it's space station. So you have some physics challenges and the cost of it. And there was other layers that made this complex. So long story short, in parallel, I'm taking my young kids at the time, 5 and 7-year-olds, to the store, during COVID, and they're putting gel sanitizer on their hands and kind of bathing in it every day. And at some point I realized, well, this doesn't seem okay. Like the liquid chemical, I don't know what's in it. They're little kids. They'd be really bathing in this stuff. And then on the other hand, I had this like UV light for architecture that's not really working for architecture in a way that I'd like it to. And I realized, wait a second, there's it's right in front of us. So we decided to create a hand wash we call Light Wash. And it's a device that you put your hands under, and in around 3 seconds, it's clean from any types of pathogens or virals. And the thing that we didn't expect, which is super interesting, was as we clicked into the benefits of this technology, we started to discover that gel sanitizers were responsible for 2% of the global carbon footprint. Consider all of the water in the manufacturing process, all the transportation of these bottles, the wasted plastic bottles. I had a friend that she is responsible for one of the major banks in the country, and she says it costs them about $30,000 a year per bank to maintain these liquid sanitizers.
Sure.
They're a fire hazard. Like you just go through the list, and our Light Wash just eliminates all of that, and it's a single device for less than $1,000, and it lives there for years. And there's no repeat, there's no consumables, and it works better than a gel. So, pretty cool product, comes from space, and that to me is an example of science and design really finding its marriage.
Yeah, I can also see it as, I've been on a number of cruises throughout our life. I can see it as the replacement of the gel in, gel out from the restaurant, from the buffet.
You got it.
Stick your hands in here.
That's right. That's right. And for hospitals as well.
Sure.
I mean, it's strong enough for MRSA and all the nasty things you can find within a hospital. So we're right now finalizing that first prototype of it. We'll see it in about 2 weeks. So really excited.
Awesome. Yeah. Oh, cool. So continuing with this thread, in your opinion, what's the biggest societal challenge we have yet to solve that's really closest to our reach? In other words, what's the issue that makes you just scratch your head and mutter, why haven't we solved this yet? We can totally do that.
Yeah, so there's also a handful, of course, but one that we're working on that I find really interesting is myopia. And myopia is not something you hear much about, but you will. So again, this same scientist over the year asking him what is one of his greatest fears. And he said in 2015, he said pandemic, which I thought was interesting. And number 2 was myopia. So it caused me to really look into it. And what that is the malformation or the unfully developed human eye. So as a child reaches roughly the age of 13 is when the eye is more or less fully developed. And kids today, their eye is not fully developing. So they're leading to this condition where their eyesight is quite poor. You'll see more and more kids have glasses than ever. By 2050, the World Health Organization predicts that half of the globe will be myopic and 10% of these people will be blind in their lifetime. And what's the cause? And it sounds kind of old man to say it, but it's screen time. And and what it is, it's the value engineering of LEDs. And LEDs, when they were first born, were full spectrum of light. And over time, they've been made very efficient by just delivering only what's visible and eliminating all the other spectrum, and which is great for the energy consumption and just to see, but it's not good for the human eye. And screen time is replacing outdoor time. Kids are
Mm,
spending more time in front of devices and in front of not full spectrum light. So the solution number one, and the frustration I have, because people don't know this, is just go outside, just get daylight. And you don't need to buy anything. You don't need to do any surgeries. You just go outside. It's a developing nation. In developing nations, there's no trace of myopia. It's only first world nations. So U.S.,
really?
China. China's having difficulty finding pilots for their air force because of this challenge. So it's right at our fingertips, and going outside would solve it.
Wow, I am so glad that we're talking today and we met. I had no idea, and I'm sure the vast majority of our listeners didn't either. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. Todd, what have we not talked about today that you want to make sure that our listeners take away from this conversation?
Oh, there's a couple of things I think. At the end of the day, I often think about this. So I guess I call myself a designer, and I guess I am a designer. But I think anybody is. I think if you're out there to really try to solve problems, you're a designer. And I really invite folks that are out there, because I meet tinkerers, I meet folks that are just doing incredible things, and then they're like, yeah, but I'm not a designer. So they kind of cast aside the validity of what they're working on. And I remember when, again, as we opened this conversation, believing all of a sudden, actually, I am a business person. I never really thought I would be. And I think I want to pass that on to other folks, that they are designers. And I think I welcome folks to get out there and to see how they might solve problems around them. We're all domain experts in our own lane. So I suggest inviting folks to embracing that.
Yeah. So, how do you help coach the average individual to really tap into the creativity muscles that we've all got them, but a lot of them have atrophied away? Creativity is obviously a big part of design. How do we get folks to re-engage with their creativity muscles?
And that's a good question. I don't know if it's being creative. I don't see what I do as creative necessarily. I see it as connecting dots and being almost common sense, and being naive enough to ask questions. No ego, like you're just trying to solve a problem. And
Sure.
so I think maybe the advice is to just don't overthink it and just get out there.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Well, Todd, let's close out the show with a few lightning round questions. Have a little fun here. So, question number one, you've just won $100 million lotto jackpot, but there's a stipulation that 50% of your net winnings go to one philanthropic organization or cause. Who do you pick?
It goes to a philanthropic organization or a cause. Who do I pick? Boy, that is a difficult one. I don't know how to answer that. And I know because I had considered this before. And I think I would want to support startups. And it's because the causes and things, there's so many political backstories that I don't know enough about and I don't want to walk into. And I know, for example, we used to make, donations to various, my brother was a former military who had passed away, unfortunately. So we had made donations to certain organizations. Then you find out that they're affiliated with other things. Oh boy. So you don't know what's true anymore. But right. I can tell you the innovators and scientists and startups that I see out there that are really trying to do good. And I would want to find how we can help these folks. To me, those are the folks rather than these sort of big organizations.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. Second question, I give you access to a time machine and you can send in a message to an earlier version of yourself. What would that message be and what previous version of yourself do you send it to?
I think I'd send it not that far back, although I probably should, but I think I'd send it back 10 years ago. So not that long ago. And it would be really to be less, and it's sort of universal advice, but to be less afraid. And I think what I mean by that is I tend to overthink ideas and sit with them and like really want it to be perfect before it goes out the door. And I think that's valid to a certain extent, but that also creates a lot of extra anxiety and difficulties. And I love, so I came up with this it's not invented this, but the idea of sort of a split testing in a way. And I've created multiple businesses with multiple activities at once. So I'm not really married to one, because then it becomes this sort of the idea of like perfecting one thing and overthinking it to death. So in the last few years, only recently have I started to really divide up myself. And now I feel much more at ease because I'm not attached to things emotionally anymore. I'm just sort of doing what's best for it and moving forward. I think that would be my advice to myself, but from 10 years ago, because earlier than that, I think things were going pretty well.
Yeah. So I think we must share a few personality trait characteristics. Yeah. I'm an INTP on the Myers-Briggs, and I'm C/D in the DISC, and both of those personality profiles always return to me this: you overthink stuff, you get caught in your own head, just move forward, buddy.
Yeah, it's amazing how if you can liberate yourself from this, and it's easier on some things than others, but I think we share very similar traits.
Yeah. So, Todd, last question. We're all works in progress. What are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth?
Really bringing it all together. You know, I've now that I'm 50, I'm at a place where 25 years of various experiences, and someone actually called this out, which was kind of interesting. She said, you're an industrial designer that started like making things, and over the last 25 years, I still make things, but kind of less, and it's more turning into direction and ideas and advising and this type of thing. So it's become kind of less physical, but more powerful in a way. Has more effect on the businesses we work with. And so I think it's kind of an interesting observation about how do we really bring together all the tools that we've acquired over the years to really now make this meaningful change that I'm pushing on.
Yeah, thank you for that. The early 50s are a period of great clarity. I'm 61, and I remember being in my early 50s, still deep in the business game, CEO, all of that, and that perspective really starts to evidence itself. It's a lot of people dread 50. I thought it was fantastic. So
beautiful. That's good advice.
Yeah. So Todd, really appreciate you being on the show today. Where can folks get a hold of you?
So you can always, of course, find me online. I have toddbracher.com and betterlab.com. And of course, a lot of what we talked about here is I've released my first book. It's come out this past June. It's called Design in Context. And it's really my playbook on how I work with businesses. So it's on Amazon and Audible and all these platforms. So I welcome any feedback should you folks want to take a read.
Awesome. Well, Todd, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. My name is Andy Temte. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find us on all the major streaming services. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public good with your friends and your colleagues. The show is produced by Nicholas Temte. We'll see you next time on the Balancing Act.